Greetings, this is Mr. Garwood with our continuing video series on Calculus 2nd edition by Briggs, Cochran, and Gillette. This is our first video on trigonometric functions and their derivatives, and I'm going to start with these two critical limit definitions. First, the limit as h goes to 0 of sine h over h is 1, and the limit as h goes to 0 of cosine h minus 1 over h is 0. These two limits are critical for me to do the limit definition for sine and cosine. I am going to do the limit definition for both sine and cosine in this video, and then our second video on trig functions, I'm going to go in and I'm going to derive the other four, our four trig functions being sine x, or our six, I'm sorry, sine x, cos x, tangent x, and then their reciprocals, cosecant x, secant x, and cotangent x. And I'm going to derive the derivative for all six of those between these two videos. This one is a little painful for our trig definition, so here we go. The derivative with respect to x of sine x is the limit as h goes to 0 of sine of x plus h minus sine of x all over h. And here comes that dastardly double or angle sum formula from pre-calc, where you're going, sweet Lord, why, oh why, do I have to know this? And, well, this is that awkward moment where that whole terrible thing becomes important. Now, so I've got the limit as h goes to 0. Now, sine of x plus h is sine x cos h plus cos x sine h, and then I'm still subtracting sine x. All of this is over h. Okay? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and get this sine x by itself. So I've got the limit as h goes to 0, because I've got a sine x here and a sine x here. I've got sine x times cos h minus 1. So that's taking this term and factoring out a sine x, and all of that is over h. And I'm going to go ahead and split this into two fractions so that this is, and I've still got this to the limit of all that, cos x sine h over h. Now, our limit sum rule says that this is exactly the same as this. So I've got, now I'm going to be a little tricksy here. I've got this fraction, cosine h minus 1 over h, times sine x, plus the limit h goes to 0, cosine x times sine h over h. Now, if you're playing at home, you may very quickly notice, hey, Mr. Garwood, those are those two really big things you just told me about. And you're exactly right. Now, from our limit definitions, I know that if this doesn't have an h, the whole thing can come out. And so I've got that times the limit h goes to 0, cos h minus 1 over h, plus cos x times the limit h goes to 0, sine h over h. Now, for those of you playing at home, that's 0 from our definitions. That's 1. So, this derivative is sine x times 0 plus cos x times 1, which means that the derivative of sine is cosine. And that's like just this magically beautiful, hey, that's kind of neat, Mr. Garwood. So, big takeaway here, the derivative of sine is cosine. So, there's sine. Now we're going to do exactly the same thing with cosine. So, the derivative with respect to x of cosine is the limit as h goes to 0 of cosine of x plus h minus cosine x over h. I again apologize. It's the joys of recording a video during tutoring at the high school I work. They come over that intercom more often than I care to admit. Now, going back, once again, this angle sum formula comes into play. I have cos x cos h minus sine x sine h minus cos x over h. And just like we did in the last one, I'm going to put the cos x's together. So I've got the limit, h goes to 0, of cos x times cos h minus 1 minus sine x sine h all over h. Now, just like I did before, I'm going to split these up into two fractions. So I've got the limit as h goes to 0 of cosine x times cos h minus 1 over h minus the limit as h goes to 0 sine x times sine h over h. Now, just like we did, the terms that only have x in them can come straight out. So I've got cosine x times the limit h goes to 0 cos h minus 1 over h minus sine x limit h goes to 0 sine h over h. Now, going back to those two critical things, this term is 0, this term is 1, and we get cos x times 0 minus sine x times 1, which means the derivative of cosine is negative sine. Got to scoot this up, I apologize. Cos x times 0 minus sine x times 1 means that the derivative of cosine is negative sine. Now this actually gives us some really neat stuff, and I'm going to try and save a little bit of paper. So let me just rewrite what we have. The derivative of sine is cosine. The derivative of cosine is negative sine. Now, bear with me here. Hey, well, okay, so Mr. Yard, what's the derivative of negative sine? We kind of have this weird pattern going. Well, that's just the negative derivative of cosine, or excuse me, of sine, which is just negative cosine x, and the derivative of negative cosine is the negative derivative of cosine, which is sine, and we go right back to the top. So we just start back over. So we have what is called a Kleins-Viresgruppe, which is a group of 4. And it's kind of neat just because it kind of rotates through. And I find that really interesting. I hope that you found this video useful. Our next video is going to use these definitions to show you what these values are. I hope you found this video useful. Good luck as our semester continues.